It is also very important to note that once you start taking these medications, you can't just stop. To maintain well, these medications must be taken under doctor supervision. There are two groups of medications that are commonly prescribed for schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. One group has been around since the 1850s and is called typically antipsychotics. They include clonazepam, trilofan, Milaril, and the most common medication, Haldol. These medications can be taken as a pill by injection. Some of the side effects are dry mouth, stiffness, sedation, and restless movements. The second group of medications, called atypical antipsychotics, are most recent and have fewer side effects. They are clonazepam, Seroquel, Gaudon, and Invega. Like the first group of antipsychotics, these medications decrease delusions and hallucinations by improving the brain's chemistry balance. These chemicals are called neurotransmitters. They let brain cells communicate with each other. Drug therapy can also change as symptoms change. The stigma of mental health disorder can make symptoms worse because they put pressures on a person to act normal so they won't be ridiculous. Chapter 3. Dealing with stigma. The dictionary definition of stigma is disgrace and shame. These are horrible feelings for someone who is already suffering. Stigma is based on disinformation and fear. Mentally ill people, including people who have schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, have historically been beaten, abused, ignored, stereotyped, and left homeless because of fear and ignorance. Some people believe that having a mental illness is a lifestyle choice, like choosing to dye your hair blue. Social stigma. Social stigma is the negative thoughts, beliefs, or reactions that society or people other than family have about mental illnesses, making negative generalizations and judgments about individuals and groups of people is wrong. Not everyone who has a mental illness is a danger to themselves or other people. Everyone experiences mental illness differently. Stigma often forces people to pretend to be someone they aren't, so they experience less abuse. I have been psychotic, but it doesn't mean I'm always psychotic or that I am not worth spending time with because I am damaged goods. Can't be trusted. You don't know how hard it is for me to just admit that I have schizophrenia. It's partly because if people know, they just dismiss me as crazy and worthless. Dale, 22. Familial stigma. Familial stigma is when parents, siblings, or other family members are ashamed or refuse to acknowledge that a family member has a psychotic disorder such as schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. It is difficult for a child and teen to deal with familial stigma because it makes them feel like they are defective or at fault for their mental illness. Often familial stigma can prevent a family member from seeking treatment that can help them get better. It can lead to feeling of self-hate, low self-esteem, and possibly drug abuse as people attempt to treat their symptoms with drugs and alcohol. effects of stigma. People with mental illnesses can feel like the lowest of the low. They are often treated as though they could fix their problems just by thinking positively or being active. Mental illness isn't a fleeting thought. It isn't caused by not thinking happy thoughts. It is a legitimate disease, even when recognized as a real illness. Many people with mental health issues are vulnerable to abuse and to people who would dope or cheat them. They endure insults and name-calling, such as psycho, and incurable. Some lose their families and homes. Other people who are not diagnosed will try to self-medicate with street drugs or alcohol rather than going to a doctor to find out they have a mental illness. Some who have been diagnosed will stop taking their medication and refuse treatment because they want to be accepted by their family and friends. Even younger children who have schizophrenia will be ostracized because they play or act differently. Am I weird? Mental illnesses can affect anyone. They affect rich and poor, young and old, and people of many different backgrounds and races. Psychotic disorders carry with them the added burden of often distinguishable behaviors. When you see someone walking ahead of you and he or she is talking to themselves and making wild hand gestures, you are likely to think, oh great, just what I need, a crazy person ahead of me. That's an attitude born out of fear and stigma. Our perceptions of mental health come from movies, books, and popular culture, where crazy people is also equated with being evil and dangerous. Stigma is also reflected in our stereotypical reactions to the inappropriate behaviors of someone who is different. The person who is talking to him is likely not to be treated for his or her illness. Psychotic disorders are very treatable, and illness is manageable. Stigma and ignorance are manageable too. One way to combat stigma is to stop gossiping and stop texting about mental illness. How you can stop the stigma. Stigma goes with lack of knowledge. Take the time to learn about mental illness and don't make judgments on people. Your attitude and actions can make a difference in people's lives and can change the way others view mental illness. Here are a few suggestions. Mental illness isn't a choice. Know that young people, include children, are affected by mental health problems. 2. Mental health disorders often have many causes, but the main ones, as with other diseases, are biological and environmental. A person who has a mental health issue is not at fault. Neither they nor their parents caused the illness. Schizophrenia and psychotic disorders are not a character flaw or a sign of a weak mind. Number 4, what you say and know and what you say and how you act are important. Calling people names and spreading informed stories about mental illness is wrong. 5. Treat people with a mental health problem the way you would like to be treated. Support your classmates, families, and friends and family members. 6. Educate yourself to keep a positive attitude. If you find people spreading this, give them the facts. 7. People who have a psychotic disorder are not necessarily dangerous to society. Even if a person's behavior is unusual, they deserve respect. Don't hurl abuse at them. Acknowledging your disorder and learning to manage your behaviors can make you feel better. Like you have escaped from a prison in your mind. Chapter 4, Managing Behaviors. Many people with mental illnesses worry about what people might think if they knew. Schizophrenia and psychotic disorders are caused might think they Schizophrenia and psychotic disorders often cause distorted behavior when left untreated or when treatments are not adjusted to an individual's disorder. Delusions and hallucinations are hard to hide, and psychotic disorders are sometimes thought to be untreatable because of these symptoms. This simply isn't true, but even when these symptoms are controlled, it can be difficult to manage behavior, blend in, and adjust to the norms set by people who do not struggle with mental health, just as dealing with stigma requires a change in mindset. Dealing with and managing behavior and attitudes requires some work both for the person with the illness and for the people they interact with each day. In the know. Stay informed about your illness. That doesn't mean just reading about it, although that's important. It also means knowing how a psychotic disorder affects your personality. Know what triggers a crisis, such as too much stress, being alone too much, heavy workloads at school, or being in a place that is too stimulating or have too many people. Once you are aware of what triggers a psychotic episode, you will be able